Welcome back to season 3 of Indiewood, the Indiewood podcast. Indiewood pod? Pod Indiewood? Pod Indiewood. Ooh, I like that too.
Wait, what is it called?
Pod Indiewood podcast.
Okay.
Like Hollywood, but Indiewood. This is a podcast about making indie films and the many hats we wear or have to wear in order to make these indie films. Because making indie films is hard and we have to do so many things for free most of the time.
I like that you added that for free.
For free. Well, last episode we talked about doing things for favors.
Yes.
With me for this season, I have Soma Helmi, who's a director and a writer, and a prestigious award winner of the Cape Town Blacklist. Can you say
the Cape List, which was in association with Blacklist.
There we go. The Cape List in association with the Blacklist, which was cool. That's a cool achievement.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then was also a fellow of the Paramount Viewfinder Directors Program.
You got it right.
I got it. Okay, cool. So the other, beyond this kind of huge list of accolades and work you've done, because you were also a commercial director for a long time. You've done a ton of commercials. You've done 24 short films almost.
Yes.
And you're doing your first feature this year. But you also teach directors how to prep, which is something you picked up doing commercials. And for those at home listening, when you do a commercial, it's usually like a day or two for prep and production and post. And you have to do a lot in a short amount of time and you pick up a lot of skills.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to be very efficient while you're doing it.
And so you've taken this kind of, knowledge base and you've boiled it down into a class that you teach. You teach a workshop, you yourself, not like through like a school or through, another program. You just have a lot of people come to you and be like, please teach me.
I teach workshops online, yeah.
Okay. So I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So my methodology is called Director's Prep for Success because I do really believe that. I think if you get your prep right, everything else kind of falls into place.
I can guarantee that because when I don't prep, everything falls apart.
Well, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's almost logic. But yeah, I did learn a lot of it as a commercial director for all the reasons that you've listed. But also I have shadowed a lot of great directors who have shown me incredible methods. And I used to work for Catherine Hardwicke, who is kind of known as the Queen of Prep. I don't know formally or not, but basically she has a very clear prep process, and I was her creative assistant, which meant I helped her prep for presentations and also for her films. So I learned a lot through her, not just how to prep, like the actual production side of things, but the creative process before that to present and to pitch and whatnot. And the last project I did with her, I went to Italy to help her prep her last feature there, Mafia Mama. So it was really great. Okay. So I went there purely just to kind of help her prep, start up the office and get in there on this incredibly, huge project with action sequences and shooting around Rome. And it was really like, and, I just go in there and help her with that prep process. But yeah, so with all of those, that's all come together in this Director's Prep for Success, and I do teach it as an online workshop. And I have 2 modules. I have one for short films and one for like longer form episodic, where you do a lot of crossboarding and block shooting, a little bit more complicated kind of scheduling. But I do the short film one mostly for people who have either just doing their first, and I think that can be really confusing and really kind of daunting, especially if it's like your first time making a short. So I break it down, from the beginning, from script breakdown to like, what do you do next? And how you should have a lookbook, and and what's the next thing? And then you shot list, and so we break it down through the workshop. And I think it's just more of like an informal chat, a lot of it, so people can ask me questions. But I love it. And I've always been really passionate about prep, because to me, I feel like the more prepped you are, the more fun you're going to have.
That's
on
true.
the day.
The more room I think you would have for improv? Because just because you prep doesn't mean you're beholden to what you've kind of prepared. You can have room for.
But not just improv, for any, and they will come up for mistakes and for
especially
problems
for short,
and for for everything, and it's not just shorts. And that's the crazy thing. I think there's this misconception that like the bigger projects, the bigger films or series don't have their issues, but they do, and they're probably on a much bigger scale. And you got to figure out how to you got to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, and if you do, you can pivot and you can be more present because you're not panicking.
Yeah.
And you are going to have people asking you questions all day long. And I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but when I always tell my students, like, being a director, you are basically surrounded by energy vampires all day long.
That tracks. Yeah. I can see
whether
that.
that's positive or negative, whatever it is, but you have to be on and you have to know the answers and you have to be positive and you have to give that energy out because it's all going to come back to you. And if you are not prepared and you are not there with a good attitude, if you're not willing to collaborate, if you're not willing to be, kind, all these things, it really trickles down to the whole set.
Yeah.
So being prepared, knowing the answers, knowing the story inside out, knowing the schedule, knowing your shot list, all of that, being really, really over-prepared means on the day you have the energy to be there and to be there for your actors and to be there for technical stuff.
My follow-up was going to be, and I think you kind of answered it, but my question was going to be, is there a difference between how you prep for a short film for a couple $1,000s to a feature that's, maybe multi-million-dollar multi-million-dollar short film, multi-million-dollar feature that's still probably an independent film?
I think it's not so much a short film versus feature. It's more like the more complicated the project is, your prep changes, obviously. The basics are all still there. That's why like doing a short film prep course is really important because, for me anyway, because your basics are always the same. You always start the same way. You break down your script. You make a lookbook. You do a shot list. So all the basic steps are there, except when you do longer form or episodic, you start doing extra prep. Like you wouldn't prep for crossboarding if you're doing like a 10-page script for a short. Yeah. But if you're doing, 100 pages, you're going to have to start prepping for block shooting and for, a little bit more complicated scheduling, a little bit more complicated shot listing. So
for those at home, can you explain a bit more about what crossboarding is?
Right. If I'm not wrong, this is a very old term that started before we had all this software. But basically, crossboarding is in episodic work. For a lot of it, you might have 1 or 2 episodes, and you take the scenes from both episodes and you figure out whether you can shoot them
that's fun.
Yeah,
okay.
in order or in, because sometimes you're also block shooting, which means you're taking all the scenes in a particular scene and you're shooting all of those in order. But you don't want to, like, if you've got 6 weeks, for example, to shoot the 2 episodes, you don't want to go back and forth. Oh, but this is episode 1, but we're also shooting episode 2 here. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you're crossboarding. It's the way sometimes I explain it is you're just taking all the scenes in both things and you're putting it in a blender and you're just gonna like color code everything and make sure they're all, in the right, because you can also, like, I guess the crossboarding you're not really doing in a feature because it's one story. But
you could also do in a sense where it's not crossboarding between episodes, but between the film itself, because sometimes you can have the same location multiple times, right?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more skewed to block shooting.
Okay.
So block shooting, you're gathering scenes that are shot within that space or that location, because you can block shoot for location, you can block shoot for actors availability, you can, so there's a lot of things that you block shoot for, but one of the main ones is locations.
So if a creative was to learn one thing, like one fundamental thing about prepping, what would it be? Like, what's the most important thing? I know there's you mentioned 5, and I think they're all equally important, but I feel like one of them is crucial.
I think all of this, most of the stuff that you do is knowing your story inside out. So a lot of the prep I do is knowing the script like the back of your hand. So script breakdown, even like I do, story beat breakdown, the shot listing, all of that kind of stuff all comes back down to know your story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't know it, that's where a lot of trouble comes in, because of the questions that will be asked of you, you don't know the answers to. And it might be as simple as, is he wearing a blue shirt? You have to have an answer for that. It might seem frivolous to you, but the costume designer needs to know that, and you need to know the answer. Sometimes it's an easy answer because who cares, and yeah, it's gold or whatever.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's vital to the story if he's wearing a blue shirt, and you need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
So know the story inside out, and that comes from your script breakdown and knowing your script inside out. I think that's probably the most important thing to know in your prep.
Yeah, I coming from a writing background and also being a director, living with a script for so long, and then kind of getting into set and be like, okay, well, like I can answer these questions about costume and intention and motivation. It's like, well, I wrote the scene this way, and hopefully it translates, the blocking translates to the page. But, sometimes I kind of assume, and this is where I get a little bit in trouble. I'll make assumptions about how people will perceive my words on the script, and then they'll read it and be like, oh, you mean, they're in a spaceship and they're, going to crash into a blue planet. And I'm like, no, they're at home, and so communication, I think, is very important in that space. Even though you kind of feel like the answers to every bit of your story,
right?
Communicating that is a completely different
right
thing.
I mean, because we're not all writing the things that we're shooting, so obviously if you do know it a lot better than most people. But like you say, because that's what a lot of prep is, it's almost like you're just opening your brain up, and you just need to put it all out there and don't make assumptions that people are going to. That's why your lookbook is so important. That's why all of your shot list is so important, because you're just putting everything that's in your brain out
onto paper,
onto paper or a computer or whatever it is, so that other people will understand your vision and what you're trying to get at.
You mentioned a lookbook and then a shot list. Do you have a space in your workflow for storyboards?
I do. I don't do a lot of storyboards anymore just for kind of drama. I do them for more action sequences and any complicated camera moves or anything that's more complicated than a kind of walk talk, scene. Anything that I feel like needs a storyboard. Yeah, I definitely storyboard.
And so I remember kind of watching older films from, early 80s, 90s, and everything was storyboarded. Yeah. And is that something that's fallen off in kind of more modern filmmaking?
I think it depends. Some directors still storyboard everything, for sure. I think because I've been doing so many projects that are very fast-paced and very complicated. Yeah. I don't have time to do that. Like, the Snapchat show I did was 20 episodes, 10 minutes, and we shot them all in 18 days. I don't have time to storyboard, all those pages. So if I had the luxury, I would love to do that, because it's incredible. Because like coming from the commercial days, your whole 30-second or 1 minute spot was storyboarded because the client had to see it, and it really helped you. But I know that for bigger budget, like bigger projects, some directors definitely still, like famous directors, still storyboard everything.
I feel like it adds, that other layer of control where you can convey more information with more clarity. And in commercial space, that's very evident. Granted, you're, storyboarding a 30-second spot instead of 3,600.
I mean, it would be amazing. I would not deny any prep. But like I said, some of these projects are just breakneck speed, and you just don't have time to slow down. And that's the thing. If I don't know my prep well and we're going at these speeds.
What sort of tools would you recommend filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, to use for kind of these steps in the process of prep?
Okay. So the first one that I always talk about in my classes is scriptation. I think it's brilliant. I think for every filmmaker, needs to have it because it really makes the script breakdown process so much easier and so much more, I don't know, like interactive and interesting. If you haven't looked at it, please look at Scriptation. Not a sponsored post.
Yeah, I was gonna say now we have some sponsor opportunities.
But other than that, I've built all of my own tools.
And so when you say built, is it something kind of, you've developed macros in Excel, or is this like an app from the ground up or something?
No, it's their Excel
Okay.
sheets or, Word docs or whatever it is that I have created myself that I follow for all my directors for,
Can I digress for 1 second?
Yes.
My friend revealed how much of his company runs on Excel.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's scary how much of the world runs on Excel.
Yes.
And shouldn't.
Yes.
Anyways.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like I've figured out how to use certain apps and, create my toolkit that I can just
it's
port
Scriptation.
Over. I have a template folder with all my, it's Scriptation, it starts with Scriptation.
And then the templates. Anything else?
The templates and apps. There's certain apps that I use a lot. I use Notability for when it's a faster paced kind of shot listing and overheads, because you can draw and make your shot list on one document.
What do you use for lookbooks?
So I used to be a graphic designer, so I used to do all of them in InDesign, but that also became a little cumbersome because I was traveling a lot. So now I actually just use Google Slides.
Interesting.
And I find it really flexible if you use it properly. But of course I use Photoshop and Illustrator and whatnot to bring those files in, or from Pinterest.
And so when you source files, are you using just like literally anything? Because I know in a commercial space, it's like an apple for the color, or a still from a photo for something.
Yeah.
Is it different for a narrative, or are you still using those kind of references?
How do you mean, like finding imagery? Is that what you mean? Yeah. No, it's a similar kind of thing. I'm now going to completely forget the website, but there's this really great website this DP started.
ShotDeck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
ShotDeck has incredible images. I use a lot. Pinterest rules. But anything online, you can just copy and paste it into slides. True. And also, there's a difference between like a lookbook, a director's lookbook, and a pitch deck. Pitch decks are beautifully designed and gorgeous, and some lookbooks are, but for me, it's more of a tool to show what's in my brain to all the departments, so they don't get that fancy.
It's just kind of like a collection of stuff.
It's just so they get the vibe and what I'm looking for and visual references, and so they don't get very fancy. So what else do I that's kind of it in terms of like the hardcore tools that I use. I don't really use other like overhead. There are a couple of apps that like Shot Designer that people like using, but I find it a lot faster to just get like an iPad and a pen and just draw on the overhead. Which,
and so for people that are listening at home, an overhead is the overhead image of your location.
Correct.
Yeah, and where the cameras are lighting and blocking.
Yeah.
For the most part.
It looks a little bit like an architect's drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the art department will usually provide that. And you just draw your little cameras and arrows and, people walking in whatever direction on that. So to me, that's easier to do than using some of the apps. There are some great in-camera apps that you use for like scouting and whatnot, like Artemis is fantastic. So for different parts of prep, I have different tools, but my own personal prep, I have that set of tools that I've made myself because I like to do it all the same way.
The templates are a really cool idea. I have one that I used to use for screenwriting that I don't use anymore just because I've kind of went avant-garde with my writing process. I was like, I don't know, we'll just see what happens. But when you mentioned ShotDeck, I used to use something called flim.ai, and it's film.ai, misspelled flim.ai. I think it is a company based out of France, but it does something very similar and alleges to use AI to kind of pull images from TV and film utilizing the keywords that you've inputted. So like, I want a wide angle with purple hues or something, and this is something that ShotDeck does as well. But I just had a really fun experience with Flim AI. It feels weird saying Flim AI.
Flim, I'll have to check out Flim AI.
And it was cheap. It was only like $10. Yeah, a month. Maybe ShotDeck is more expensive or less expensive. I'm not sure. But it did provide that same kind of, for me, for my narrative references, where I could pull characters or pull, the style of filmmaking that I wanted.
Right.
And it was something that I had some success with when I pitched a short to a vendor. I guess would be the right term. It was a camera manufacturer, and they're like, "Cool, here's a camera. Do you want money?" I was like, "Yes." So we're still having that conversation.
Amazing.
And then, kind of hearing your process as well made me think about this piece of software called Dash.io, the-producer.io, and it's a browser-based production tool for casting. Lookbook, screenplay. I don't know if it has tools to break down a screenplay, but you can have like your screenplay at a glance, and then you can also like organize your casting. Then you can utilize that to make a shot list, and then you can utilize all those things that you've created within that toolkit to then schedule your days and do call sheets. And then
this is for producers.
Yeah,
I assume it's from the name. Okay.
Yeah, so mostly for producers, but
Right.
I find it really cool as a director just to kind of like organize everything for a project before I hand it off to someone who knows a lot better than I do. But then also what's really cool is towards the end, when you have shot everything and you're done with production, you can then upload completed cuts for review into like a frame.io kind of program where you can do notes and stuff. And it's still in its infancy, at least it was when I reviewed it a year ago. But I thought it was the coolest thing ever because it condensed all those things that I've had strewn about for for everything else into one little package. Yeah,
that is cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Yeah, I should make an app. Probably
you should. Yeah, although when I got it, it was still in beta, and I was like, man, this is clunky. It's a lot better now, but making apps is hard.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know if I'd want to do that, but
we have templates.
I have templates.
You have templates and scriptation.
Yeah.
Well, Soma, thank you for
you.
sharing your workshop. For those who want to find your workshop, where would they go?
They would go to my website, somahelmi.com/workshops.
And I'm going to do that because that short film workshop sounds like a lot of fun. And I feel like I'm really bad at prep. So
Hey.
I might jump in and be like, "Hello, remember me?"
Oh,
Because that sounds really fun and exciting to kind of explore. And I always wanted to really refine, having been a filmmaker who just kind of winged it for the longest time. I've wanted to really bring in a lot of the commercial aspects of hard work, quote unquote, into my workflow. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Well, thank you once again. Good luck on your mystery feature this summer. We want to hear all about it when you come back, and then hopefully we'll see the show you shot in Jakarta.
Yeah, we're in post right now, so it should be coming out
That's
soon.
why we can't talk about it.
We can talk about it then.
we'll put links in the description when they're out. So if you're listening to this 5 years from now, you'll get an update.
It's not that long, but yes, thank you.
Yeah. Soma, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, take care. Thank you for listening to the Indiewood Podcast. You can find us on anywhere you find your podcasts and on Instagram at IndiewoodPod. See you next time.
From the CFA Network, Cinematography for Actors is bridging the gap through education and community building. Find out about us and listen to our other podcast at cinematographyforactors.com.
Cinematography for Actors Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit. For more information on fiscal sponsorship, donations, because we're tax exempt now, so it's a tax write-off, and upcoming education, you can email us at contact@cinematographyforactors.com. Thanks.